Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Building Better from INFO511 Data Reengineering. Today, we're going to take you through our journey to address the deficiencies related to receiving reports, which we have deemed a critical issue impacting compliance and efficiency. We collaborated with other groups tasked with this projects tackling related system challenges to create a unified and robust solution. Receiving reports ensure accountability and documenting goods and services. However, deficiencies were identified such as delays, lack of compliance checks, and insufficient risk assessment. These issues led to operational inefficiencies and compliance risks that we aim to resolve. Next slide, please. The solution framework. We adopted a systematic approach beginning with entity identification for the system's entity relationship diagram. Attributes were then, for each entity, were then outlined, followed by an ERD structure and relationship mapping. We aligned our process with broader systems needs, incorporating feedback and best practices. We started with the 7 entities being the originating department, receiving report, auditor, approving official, contract, funding source, and internal control. These entities were then evaluated, and we settled on the final entities being those 7 in addition to the compliance requirement. Next slide, please. Attributes for each entity were carefully defined. For example, receiving reports include attributes like report ID, date reception, and status. These attributes capture the essential details needed for tracking, auditing, and compliance. Next slide, please. The relationships between entities were mapped to mirror real-world workflows. For instance, an originating department or agency submits many receiving reports, which are then linked to one or more contracts and funding sources. Internal controls ensure that receiving reports comply with both contracts and broader compliance requirements, while auditors oversee this entire process. And now, to delve more into the processes, I will pass this on to my colleague, Mr. Hunter Hall.
Thank you. Throughout the process, we addressed the submission process, how reports are created, and delved into how to structure a system to receive them, including the importance for compliance audits and deficiency trackings, where we logged deficiencies, identified issues with them, and directed them to the correct solution. Next slide, please. We were able to implement several use cases to test the validity of our model with actors such as auditor, approving official, and internal control. We also broke down how these actors would interact with the system to ensure that the system was functional and sufficient for the needs of the organization. Next slide, please. We did this 2 times more for a total of 3 use cases. We developed more throughout the process, but narrowed it down to ones that we felt were most apt for the issues. And we were able to identify different aspects of the system that were both necessary and needed to be strong enough to receive a lot of reports. Next slide, please. There were a lot of assumptions involved in this process due to the fact that we didn't have all the information, and we had to operate on some guesswork, as well as operate within the constraints of the system that we did know. Some of the key assumptions we had displayed here can be seen as data accuracy, ensuring that all data entered into the system is accurate, and is sufficient for the report received, as well as the system availability, ensuring that the system can be available for all who need it and available for all the needs associated with the system. With this kind of system, we realized that regulatory alignment is vital because it needed to be able to handle the regulations applied to this organization. There were some constraints as well. System access being restricted to specific roles ensures that the data is secure and uh, is appropriately managed, as well as the compliance requirements, ensuring that it complies with the federal regulations that the organization is required to follow. We also dealt with some resource limitations, ensuring that this is not too large a system for it to be useful. Data integrity, ensuring that reports and related data align and are actually checking the reports, as well as the technical infrastructure and escalation process. Next slide. We modeled the system using different diagrams and to ensure that we addressed issues and addressed the use cases effectively using these visual diagrams, such as a context diagram and a CRUD matrix to best identify our strengths and weaknesses within the system. And I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Ethan to wrap up this part of the slideshow.
All right, thank you, Hunter. So in addition to the other two diagrams, which we just talked about, we also made a workflow diagram. It basically provides a graphic overview of the business process. So it goes through the different entities like auditor and OMB. And then these models basically highlighted the interdependencies and ensured clear role assignments among all of the actors. And next slide, please. So in integrating our narrative into this project, the conceptual design directly addresses the following key aspects. And then we outlined some report deficiencies as well as compliance requirements. And then lastly, the stakeholder roles. So in report deficiencies, basically just wanted to streamline a submission process to minimize errors and incomplete information. And then the deficiency tracking is built into the system, which allowed us to flag issues and resolve them promptly. This creates a clear audit trail and ensures accountability. As for our compliance requirements, the design integrates compliance requirements into both auditing and approval workflows. So each report is cross-referenced with applicable contracts and internal controls to ensure alignment with regulatory guidelines. Auditors are supported with structured tools to review reports efficiently, document findings, and enforce compliance requirements. As for the stakeholder roles, system delineates responsibilities across stakeholders. So the originating departments create and submit accurate reports, approving officials validate and approve those reports, and then auditors review reports for compliance, deficiencies, and maintain oversight of regulatory adherence. Next slide, please. And to wrap up this section, in conclusion, in this project, we've defined a robust and scalable system for managing and receiving reports, resolving the deficiencies which we have initially identified in the current process. We combine data modeling, workflow visualization, and stakeholder-driven use cases to ensure the system meets operational and compliance requirements. We wanted to emphasize accountability, streamlining report management, and reducing the risks of errors of non-compliance. To finish, we have some recommendations for the system implementation. So we would recommend that we proceed with the development of the system using the proposed design as a blueprint So it's not completely comprehensive. We just want to follow that structure that we've laid out. This will prioritize automation or report validation, compliance auditing to reduce manual effort and improve efficiency. We'd also recommend training and stakeholder engagement. So we want to conduct training sessions for all stakeholders to familiarize them with the new system and their responsibilities, uh, and also maintain open channels for feedback to address any challenges during system rollout. As for after that system rollout, we do want to emphasize continuous improvement. So that's making regular audits and reviews of the system after deployment to identify areas for enhancement. This will allow us to incorporate stakeholder feedback and emerging compliance requirements into future updates. Lastly, for data security and compliance, this is just so we can implement the data properly and protect sensitive data. So that'll allow us to regularly update compliance requirements within the system to stay aligned with regulatory changes. And now I'm going to be passing it off to Matthew to talk about our application of the case tool.
Hello, my name is Matthew Guthrie. I'm going to quickly run through all of the work that I put into the Magic Systems architecture software or our case tool management software. Firstly, I added the 7 entries from the data dictionary into the software. Incorporated a swim lane diagram showing how a report is created, validated, audited, and approved. I created a data flow diagram talking about one of the use cases where a report is submitted and flagged for audit. Report is received, an auditor reviews it, ensures that it meets the compliance and internal control policies. It is then handed off to be approved. Everything is documented and the compliance record is updated. I entered in our ERD into the software, have all the crow's feet notation in it. I added all of the attributes of all the entities off to the side, and then crudely visualized some of the use cases within the software, showing what auditors are using or doing, showing the role of the originating department and approving officials in use case number 2, and visualizing use case number 3. I've included the actors, descriptions, triggers, and I hope this has been a useful report.
Doing. Exactly. I won't be able to find that on film though. That's stuff to do manually.
So, unfortunately, Brandon and Ahmed recorded the parts, and we'll play that first, and then we'll move on with the people who are in class.
I remember when you sure you did say the sound.
Hi, we're the data architects, and this is our final presentation.
It is from my end.
Today we're going to talk about the topic we chose to focus on, validity of obligations for miscellaneous obligation documents. Out of the 5 topics, we picked this one because we found it the most interesting and thought it would give us the best chance to work on something practical and impactful. It's all about making sure that the financial obligations, like undelivered orders and utility bills, are accurate, complete, and compliant. We didn't tackle this project alone. We worked closely with other groups, learning from their approaches and finding common ground. These discussions helped us refine our processes and build on the best ideas to come up with solutions that address shared challenges. Now, why does this topic matter? Because even routine things like validating obligations can cause big problems if they aren't managed properly. Things like overstated balances, missed deadlines, or even fraud. And it's not just about the numbers. These issues can impact trust, accountability, and how smoothly the organization operates. Our goal with this project is simple. It's to make sure everything is accurate, transparent, and easy to manage. And to do that, we focused on 4 key areas: validating obligations, detecting fraud, reviewing dormant accounts, and improving communication. These pillars help create a system that's reliable and runs efficiently. So let's dive in and take a closer look at the tools and the techniques we use to make it all happen. Our main goal is to validate financial obligations accurately so that we can avoid problems like overstated balances, dormant accounts, and fraud. At the same time, we're focused on aligning everything we do with the federal standards to help ensure compliance and maintain financial integrity. So to meet these goals, we've introduced some key tools. The data dictionary helps us keep all of our terminology consistent so that there's no confusion across the team. We have our workflow models and our swim lane diagrams, which help break down each step and assign clear responsibilities, making sure that everyone knows their role. The data flow diagram maps out how obligation data moves through our system, while the journey flow tracks the life cycle of each obligation from start to finish. These tools work together to simplify processes and keep everything organized. The impact of these tools is significant. We're reducing fraud risk, improving the accuracy of our financial reports, and streamlining workflows for greater efficiency and accountability. It's all about building a system that's clear, reliable, and effective. With that, I'll hand it over to Ahmed to discuss the challenges that we encountered.
Good afternoon, everyone. Now let me walk you through some of the challenges that we noticed. First, we encountered the issue of overstated balances in undelivered orders. Balances for items like utility bills can often go unchecked, leading to inflated records. This makes it harder to know the true financial state, causing confusion and potential budget mismanagement. Then there's the problem of dormant and unresolved obligations. Some accounts sit inactive for months, creating risks that can escalate into compliance issues if not properly monitored and addressed. And then we also noticed that there's a lot of inconsistent communication between employees, managers, and external teams, which adds to these difficulties. Um, Delays in sharing updates like validation results or audit findings often slow down resolution efforts, leaving critical tasks incomplete. There are also fraud risks, which present a significant challenge. There are sudden spikes in account balances or high-value dormant accounts that indicate fraud, and without proper detection tools, these risks can slip under the radar. And finally, adhering to federal compliance standards, such as those outlined in the Green Book, is a constant uphill battle. Ensuring every team follows these rigorous standards requires precision and coordination, which can be hard to achieve across diverse teams. Now, moving on to the solutions we implemented to address the challenges and improve our processes. We started by adopting the stakeholder validation checklist from the Reengineers team. Their focus on contract validation and compliance emphasized stakeholder involvement, and our improvement was integrating their checklist into our UOD validation process, ensuring a thorough review and enhanced accuracy across all obligations. Next, we adapted an approval tracking system from the Building Better group. Their priority was robust document verification and compliance audits. Our improvement was to incorporate their system into our process, streamlining validation cycles and strengthening accountability for managing miscellaneous obligations. And for fraud detection, we leveraged cross-verification techniques introduced by Matrix Movers. Their approach to ensuring liquidation accuracy was invaluable, and our improvement was applying their cross-verification strategy to mitigate fraud risks and strengthen dormant obligation management, helping us catch discrepancies more effectively. From the SOC reporting services team, we adopted their emphasis on detailed evidence review to improve compliance assurance. Our improvement involved leveraging their methods to enhance the depth and quality of our audit findings and ensure that every compliance issue is thoroughly documented and actionable. Finally, we recognize the need for continuous training to address compliance and fraud detection gaps. We looked at the targeted risk awareness training programs from multiple groups, and our improvement was to develop a tailored training initiatives informed by risk assessments and audit feedback, enhancing the overall competency of our employees in compliance and risk management. And now I'm going to be passing it on to Tim to walk us through our data dictionary.
So with our data dictionary, the data dictionary is all about managing and structuring our data. We kept note of 8 key entities that we need to follow: obligation, employee, manager, audit, communication, control activities, risk assessment, and training programs. And for each entity, they have specific roles that they need to follow. For obligation, we need to track our details, such through ID, department, and our risk factors with accuracy. And for employee, we need to capture our details, including the ID, the role and performance, so that our work can flow properly. Our manager defines our responsibilities and it has authority for our streamlined action. Our audit findings that document the details, recommendations, and actions. Communications allows us to communicate types of methods that we need to follow so we can run our process accurately. Our control activities that tracks our priorities and security for effective monitoring. Our risk assessment evaluates the risk, the likelihood, or any kind of frauds that may happen. And our training programs keeps evaluation scores and make sure our information is up to date. So our processes go through the validation process, which makes sure our data is approved, make sure that our data is updated and perform well. Our fraud detection goes through the process of scanning, make sure we can find our red flags in our data. And then we have our life cycle management, which manages our storage and our final product. Then next, we'll go into our ERD. Earlier on, we made an ERD, but it was more complex, but we simplified it, and we're gonna highlight that. So with our simplified ERD, it helps us to have a good flow of information coming in with our core entities that I previously talked about: employee, managers, training programs, audit findings, control activities, and risk assessment. So for our employees, we want to make sure tasks are being executed well and that we're enhancing our skills. For our training programs, we're steadily improving our employees and their capabilities for performance and risk management, risk assessment, fraud, make sure our data is controlled, and control and audit finding, we're guiding our information, making sure that there are control activities, communication, effectively communicating the flow between our employees, managers, and our audit group. And then our managers putting out the tasks that our team needs to put into action and align our data with our organization goals. And then next, we'll jump right into our block diagram.
Thank you, Tim. So basically our block diagram is like an orchestra. It plays where every instrument has to play its part. So basically we have key processes as validation process, fraud detection, and document lifestyle as mentioned by Tim as well. I'll get into it one by one. One of the key process as we see is validation processes in which there's initial validation and approval checks. Basically, this step is to ensure that it is a foundation of our system and it acts like a filter, ensuring that every obligation aligns with our standards before moving forward. Then we have fraud detection, and this is where the system becomes proactive. Instead of just waiting for something to occur or instead of waiting for a fraud to occur specifically, we use the automated tools to scan for risk, threshold detection, and the red flags in the system. Finally, we have the silent guardian of our system, that is a document life management, in which the documents are stored securely and protected by encryption and access controls. These processes, validation, fraud detection, and document management, they are not just steps, they are a system of checks and balances. Next, we come on to the swim lane diagram. We can think about this about how teams in a relay race are exactly know when to pass the baton. So we see we have 4 major lanes, that is contract originator, approving authority, audit team, and system database. Here we focus on the contract drafting and approval as the first step, in which this is basically getting things done right from the start. Then the audit process adds another layer of assurance, and it's where the contracts are reviewed with a magnifying glass. Next, we have a clear role allocation in which every team member has a specific lane. And to the next, we have process transparency in which the diagram can make it very easy to see the big picture. It's not just about the steps, but about the understanding and how each role contributes to one another. We have efficiency, in which we help by clearly mapping the steps and our task. We eliminate the redundancies and streamline the workflows. We have accountability, because of which every step is assigned to a specific role, and it's easier to track progress and ensure the accountability at every stage. Finally, it's not just a visual tool, but it is also a strategy for ensuring clarity, transparency, and accountability in our processes. I'll pass on to Adarsh.
So moving on to the final diagram that we had made was the use case diagram. So for our topic, we had, as a group, found out 3 use cases. So use cases are essential basically for structuring our processes, which we had mentioned before, and aligning that with our organization goals. They help us to identify gaps, help us in streamlining our operations, and ensure that our financial obligations are validated accurately. So moving on to the first use case diagram, if you could open it up on the case tool. So on the left, we have the actors, which are the different entities that are involved in this particular use case. So the first use case is validation and fraud detection, which ensures the financial accuracy for undelivered orders, addressing risks such as overstated balances. As you can see in the middle, is basically an workflow of how the various actors and the steps that they go through to ensure that this use case is completed. They are driven by various triggers such as overdue obligations, which ensure timely identification and control of fraud risks. Moving on to the second use case, which is internal communication, which is critical for transparency in validating financial obligations. Clear and efficient communications ensure that all the stakeholders, which are the actors here, the employees and the managers, are aligned, which reduces delays in addressing validation issues. As you can see, after ensuring the steps are completed, the triggers include completion of validation of tasks or the need to address audit findings. Now, moving on to the final use case is dormant account review and account remediation, which tackles risks posed by unliquidated obligations. And periodically assessing dormant accounts, we ensure compliance and accurate financial reporting. Triggers such as scheduled reviews and threshold breaches prompt corrective reactions to maintain financial integrity. So to conclude, the validity of miscellaneous obligation documents is crucial for many reasons such as financial accuracy, mitigating fraud risks, and maintaining compliance with federal standards, which we found out in the Green Book. The key takeaways from this project would be including the importance of accurate validation to prevent overstated balances and fraud, aligning our processes to ensure financial integrity, and leveraging streamlined workflows to enhance accountability and cost efficiency. Our recommendations or the next steps that we are looking forward would be implementing the structured tools which we had discussed previously, such as the workflow models and the data flow diagrams to standardize and visualize the validation process. Additionally, we'll also focus on employee training to build a robust understanding of validation and compliance requirements. We also have to regularly review and improve our processes and adapt to the changing financial and regulatory landscapes. Thank you, and we're open for any questions you have.
Jeannie, I'll let you go first on this.
Is it okay? So we're asking questions, I guess. Yeah. I like the use of the block diagram. It helped me like really focus on something very simple. And I guess going back, I think you had presented the data diagram before. Was there any attempt or any linkage that you found from the processes to the data? I guess I just wasn't seeing that integration. So I'm just curious if that was there, but I did like the use of it, of the block diagram. Over.
We didn't find any data that we could link it to, but whatever concepts and financial terms we could use it from the Green Book, we try to implement those in the block diagram and make some sense out of it.
Okay, yeah, I like the use of the Green Book as well. I guess the other thing I was going to add, you talked a lot about the risk and addressing that. I thought that was great. The other thing that I hear in my office is the loss of buying power. With every dollar that we don't have a good accounting of, that's a dollar that we can't spend somewhere else, maybe more effectively. So I would just want to see you guys get credit for that as well. So. But yeah, I think that was great. Thanks. Yeah, I talked about integration. I was trying to take notes because I forget so quickly. Yeah, it was a good description of the tools too. I thought each time, why we were using each one of the diagrams. And then I guess I have a similar question. How do we know we were successful? How do we know that these items these recommendations that you're making, that it's going to bring success? And I'm not sure that we would answer that now, but that's something that I wish I'd asked like halfway through the course.
As far as we can say that once if it's implemented, establishing certain key performance indicators for various reasons such as accuracy, timeliness, and other KPIs, which go in detail for each topic, would be a best way to measure these for implementing. So yeah, establishing certain key performance indicators would be a way to move forward with it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I'll just add a couple points. Did you guys happen to see in the news today a retail organization that might have benefited from the constructs that you guys put together? You, of course, read the newspaper all during the day while you're in the middle of finals, right? So Macy's, you've heard of Macy's?
Yes.
They had $150 million fraud that they discovered today that could have been caught by the just types of tools and controls that you put in place. It went 3 years undetected. It was a single employee who originally made a mistake and then decided to cover up the mistake instead of saying, I made a mistake. And Macy's is going to have to go back and restate their for 3 years. So these are non-trivial types of things that you're looking at. They're something that could be very accurate and applicable in that context. One last question for you. Comment on the role that AI played. How has it been helpful? Was it okay? I mean, again, was it considered to have been key? What are your thoughts on that?
So AI played a significant role, I would say, because when we were going through the Green Book and the various sources that we had, summarizing that information in a very brief and collective manner, that's where Notebook LM, ChatGPT took
Reading that entire book and getting it down to something bite-sized. Right?
Exactly. So summarizing that, it played a great part because when you have so much information, picking out pieces from there and putting into words like a PPT or what we're trying to implement is very difficult. And that's where I think so integrating AI, it helped us in automating this stuff.
Right. Any other thoughts?
Wrapping up on what Adarsh told, I feel like at every step we were moving forward and narrowing and progressively getting to the final stage. AI did catch up to us, and we had to do not give so many prompts for the same thing. It did understand what direction we were headed to.
Numbers, right?
Right. And finally, when we were moving in the last stage of the presentation as well, all we had to do was get Notebook LM and ChatGPT to work together hand in hand and get the final conclusions that you see on the screen right now. So AI did help out in a way where it did easy the job we had to do in a long time with the data that we provided. So, yeah.
I also want to make note for everybody that you guys were extremely helpful in reaching out proactively to the other teams and helping them with that work. I just want to appreciate it. Yeah.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I did write that down too, Peter. Yeah, the integrate and leverage the colleagues' work. Thank you. Yeah, I thought that was really great.
Who's next?
We can go next. Sabrina is going to start pressing the screen.
Somehow I know Brina was going to She's our star this year. Our unseen, unknown star, right? You're not an AI, are you? Are you an Brina? Or Brina, are you an AI?
If I'm in AI?
Are you an AI?
No.
Sure. How would we know? What would you tell us if you were?
That's true. That would be good code written.
I just get that as from a non-IS student. I think you've done really, really excellent work in picking this stuff up. And again, I hope you understand you have an affinity for it. I think the group's benefited from working with you. So
No worries. All right. Okay, then we can get started. So hello, everyone. This is group 2, and we have the topic of failure to establish governance and what could be a solution, SOC reporting. So we want to walk you through the importance of understanding governance as a whole and how it's relevant in data and how it can help to control reporting. So my name is Sabrina. I'm just gonna start us off. So At first, I want to talk about governance because this is a big topic, and it's going to be important for everyone who sits in the classroom, whether you are going to be part of the people who establish policies or you're going to be subject to it. I think it's important to understand what the importance is about. So basically, just to give a definition about governance, it's about a framework of policies or procedures that makes an organization accountable for its operation. And in the best case scenario that aligns with the strategic goal of the company, but it can also be subjected to legal requirements or other market requirements to hold companies accountable. And why does governance matter? Like, why should a company put up with this? It's because they can leverage from having these processes, because they can ensure data integrity, to showcase that they have accuracy and reliability in their information and decision making. They can also look at their security, which is a really, really big topic right now, how to protect against data breaches and how to authorize access. And most importantly, it's about regulatory compliance. Like I already mentioned, there are many rules like GDPR, NIST, ISO standards that companies have to abide by, and they can use governance or have governance in their structure in place to comply to it. So all in all, it's not only about following rules, it's about streamlining process and reducing redundancies and improving that outcome. And we want to showcase through SOC how that's done. So we all read the Big Coast case study, and that's a good example to show. So what happens if a company doesn't have that in place? What does that look like? So we can see that usually there's a lack of leadership because the leadership has insufficient data knowledge to make decisions, or there's in total like a disorganized structure where people don't know who's responsible for what, who has the priorities, and there are missed opportunities because if a company doesn't comply with, for example, GDPR, they can't operate in Europe, and they're missing out on these opportunity costs. So also what's to mention is with procedures and policies is also a tool there for change management, which is also very, very important. To handle the resistance to change. And if a company doesn't have a clear governance structure, they usually face these issues. So with our group project, we want to address these missteps. We want to showcase like what can a company do to make sure they're on the better end of this issue. And through SOC reporting, we'll showcase that there are clear defined roles and responsibilities in the reporting procedure. We have data standards and policies that are consistent for handling data quality and security. And most important, we have stewardship and oversight over the policies that are followed. So I'm going to hand over to Ramisa, and she's going to explain what is SOC and what's its type.
All right, I'm gonna briefly talk about what is SOC. SOC is Service Organization Controls, which are documents that shows how well a service provider manages important areas like security, data privacy, and reliability. These reports are created through audits and help business make sure that a service provider follows best practices before they outsource tasks or services to them. They give assurance that the service provider is trustworthy and meets certain standards. There are a few types of SOC, which are financial controls, public assurance, security, availability, and privacy. Next slide. All right, so next we're going to talk about SOC reports as governance checkpoints. SOC reports help check how well a company manages important areas like security and data protection. SOC 1 focuses on financial reporting, so governance failure could result in inaccurate financial data or controls. SOC 2 looks at data security and privacy, and failures in governance can lead to risk like unworthy access or data leaks or not following rules. These reports are key to ensuring a company is properly managing these areas.
And I will jump in to show and talk about our diagrams after discovering that we wanted to continue on with the governments and SOC. The first thing that we wanted to map out is the ERD. So this is the giant SOC ERD that we all started working individually. And could we please go to the next slide? We realized that it was a very broad SOC, so we were able to condense it by simplify to the entity and attributes that we felt like as a group were able to apply more specific and details. And in the screenshot for the SOC ERD, we felt like the entity for audit team, service organization, system, the user entity, the control, criteria, risk, and the reports are the main entity that we want to really like focus on when we are mapping out this ERD. And carrying on to the next slide are the use cases that we created, and we work among other teams as well, just so we can have like a template that we all could follow through. And we have a total of 5, but we just wanted to put a screenshot of one of the examples that we have, which is to generate a SOC report, which involves like the actors, which is like the entities that I mentioned from the previous slide with the simplify ERD, and then the description and just how we would initiate it by going forward with the use cases of the SOC report. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide as well. And this one is another diagram that we all worked on collectively among other teams as well, that we formulated for the supplier inputs process output with the downstream consumers. And we feel like using the ERD from previous slides and the use cases, we were able to populate this diagram, and we felt like all of the other teams are all intertwined with each other, especially with the matrix movers, because we felt like their majority of the task is to sorry, not the metric movers, but the building better, which is like receiving reports. And we felt like that's definitely aligning with the SOC reporting services. And it's definitely like a higher level overview when it comes to these 2 screenshots. And we just felt like at the end of it, the downstream of the consumers are the reason why all the groups are interconnected with each other, and we would like benefit off each other. And we were able to use like different resources within our group, like ChatGPT and also the Google Notebook to have it refined. And then to have this idea to share with the common vocab and the diagram that we receive. And I will go ahead and pass along to the next colleague, which is Rashmita, for the functional and non-functional requirements.
Oh, thank you, Shripat. So now that we have explored what is SOC, its types, and the use cases, let's move forward and see about the system requirements. First, I'll start with the functional requirements, which outlines the key operations the system must perform. So if we imagine the life cycle of a SOC, it starts with an auditor logging into the system, and the process begins with collecting logs from various sources and analyzed for anomalies. So once all the information is gathered, the auditor compiles the findings into a SOC report. So the next stage is accessing and reviewing the SOC reports, where the user requests for the SOC report, and the system ensures the secure access is granted only to authorized users. So here, all the interactions between the user and the service organizations are logged for security purposes. And moving on to the audit team management, this ensures only certified and active auditors are added to the team. When the auditor manager inputs the details, the system validates certifications and cross-checks them with active audits to avoid errors. And finally, we have compliance request handling, where users can request SOC reports and identify and verify first, and then the report is issued. Moving on to the next slide. We have the non-functional requirements, starting with the operational requirements. The SOC system must work seamlessly among all the modern devices like laptops, tablets, and mobile phones. It supports mobile and web layouts to ensure flexibility for the users. And performance is another key aspect. It is optimized with real-time updates for security alerts. It supports up to 5 analysts working concurrently without degrading the performance, and processes the threads within a couple of seconds. Moving forward to next slide. Security requirements. So security is very critical here. So the system uses role-based access controls and the data encryption and multi-factor authentications. And the system maintains immutable audit logs to track all access and changes to SOC reports. And incident response protocols ensures that breaches are quickly detected and resolved. Moving on to the cultural and regulatory requirements, the SOC system is accountable for a diverse workspace by supporting multiple languages, and the embedded collaborative tool makes the teamwork easier no matter where the team is located. So these clear policies for SOC report sharing and handling are enforced. So by addressing these functional and non-functional requirements, we ensure that the SOC system is not only meets the operational standards, but also builds trust among the stakeholders. Next, I call Akash to conclude our presentation.
Yeah, coming to the conclusion, basically organization face some challenges when there is a failure in establishing the governance and implementing the SOC reporting, which leads in compliance violations, that is breaking the rules, and reputational damage, which is the losing the trust of the customers. Next is insights of the project. Throughout this project, we have analyzed the governance structures and explored the SOC reports. And at last, we have identified some functional and non-functional requirements, which helped us to come over all of the challenges. Next is importance of governance. That is, governance ensures the accountability, data integrity, and the security, which helps the organization to strengthen the compliance and stakeholders' trust. In the end, this project highlights that learning from past mistakes and setting up good governance, and as well as the SOC reporting systems, can make organizations stronger and lead to success. Coming to the next slide, that is takeaways. We have used the notebook LM effectively to enhance our project efficiency as well as the documentation. And coming to the Cameo tool challenges, we have faced some challenges while using the Cameo tool. Unfortunately, we can't access the Cameo tool due to some license issues. Next is we had a proper communication with other team members to maintain alignment on our project objectives and deliverables. Next, we mainly focused on our complex data models and workflows, which we made it simpler which is converted to in an understandable manner. And we have also used the lab notes to maintain complete progress, and we also use the document to make some changes in the future. And throughout this project, we maintain the complete record for our development process here. Thank you.
Over to you, Dini.
I guess, thank you. This is a beautiful presentation. I guess my question would be, I like the requirements. I'm curious, what were you basing those requirements on? Was there any resource or anything that you found particularly helpful in coming up with those? Or was there a specific gap? I mean, I know you laid out the finding. Was there something that you were addressing or a resource that you were using to come up with the requirements?
Thank you. That's a very good question. So when we looked at SOC reporting structures, we noticed that this is a very popular deliverable that is often done by Big Fours in exchange for like other enterprises. And we wanted to just show a general like application that could be applied by any type of organization. So we tried to look at it from like a universal standpoint, like what does the SOC stand for and what in general it could encompass. So we were just talking about auditing in general, like about like financial data, but we didn't really had like a use case or a specific example to connect that to. And even when I was like personally looking at this field, like when it comes to jobs and other requirements, I saw that that's like the companies look at it more from a regulatory perspective when they look at reporting. They often determine the content based on legal requirements. So I just wanted to communicate to the group and the group as a whole to the class that this is like a general tool that can be used, but it has to be adapted to the companies and what their business needs and requirements. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. I thought that was a great ad. I didn't think it was something we were asking for, but I thought it was very helpful. So there wasn't anything in the data artifacts that you were drawing from or anything that you were learning. That was the other diagram that you did was the link with the inputs and outputs. I didn't write it down, but
Oh, yes. So
Yes.
here, yes, that's actually a good draw because here we looked at our class as a whole and how other groups manage their deliverables and what they are specializing on and how we can interconnect with it. So it's actually a good example to showcase like how we, like as this SOC auditing team, could help the metrics movers or the building better engineers and how it would like interconnect. So that would be a good example of the application of it.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that was a great ad. Thanks.
Thank you.
Each of these diagrams that you're showing of Rena and team could also be converted into a high-level context diagram. If we were a course in modeling methods, which is a different course that you can take, they would start you out right here and say, building better, these are the inputs, the processes, the outputs, the consumers. You could immediately take that information within the case tool and put it into a context diagram that would then be decomposed into a data flow diagram, therefore into your use cases, again, all linked together by a data dictionary. So yeah, I agree, Gabriel, very nice work in terms of reaching out across the other groups and doing some integrative analysis on this. You guys have been very collaborative in that respect too. Once again, what's the role of AI? Everybody's sort of taking it for granted, I think, but I'd love to call it out here. Was it helpful, hindrance, maybe helpful, somewhat helpful? What are your comments?
It was very helpful because it helped structure our content a bit or gave us like a little bit of a footprint to start off, especially around like the workflow diagram that we had that was way too big. This is why we didn't include it. Or this diagram that you see right now. It's also something that adds like proficiency for our professional career because right now it's really something that we can leverage in interviews. If you mention like, hey, like I have this class and we're using AI tools to make data-driven decisions, that really stands out because not a lot of people can handle that. So I may like ask like my other team members to jump in to like speak about their personal experiences, but it was definitely helpful.
Thanks. Anybody else want to offer? Ash? Okay, so one other thing on the case tool, I know you guys had trouble getting to it. I sent around at about 3:15 p.m. just in time for you all, right? Some more additional instructions. That is something you can do from this point. You do not have to do anything else with this, but if you want to take and enhance these and move some of this information into that, you can do that, and I will be glad to go back and incorporate that in here. Remember, my goal with this is for you to be able to say to somebody else, right, somebody who's going to hire you, we've done some really interesting things in the class. I'd love to show them to you so that you can click on that YouTube button, right, and go straight to what it is. So if you want to enhance your diagrams at all in that sense, let me know, and I'll work with you to get that finalized in, just the same way as I'm going to put the better version of the first group's presentation in there as well. On that, not required, but you still need to pay me just officially, right? So make sure we get that taken care of too. Anything else from this group? Again, nice work all the way around. Let's keep moving.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? You get the longest name.
Yeah.
Let's start with the end in mind, right? We have a word for that. We call it bluff, bottom line up front. So somebody will ask you occasionally to make your presentation bluff.
Okay. So, good evening, everyone. We are Team Data Reengineers, and we'll be discussing on our topic validity of obligations for contracts. So, my entire team is here. We have Satvik, Sharath, Riti, Gauri, and myself, Jason. So, this system is designed to streamline and enhance the processes involved in contract validation, compliance auditing, and dispute resolution. So, let's just begin with by discussing what we accomplished during this project. So our primary focus was on streamlining the workflows for key processes in contract management. And those processes are listed here. We have validation of contract terms, which ensures compliance with legal standards, and compliance auditing helps in reviewing the contracts to ensure they adhere to the regulations. And then breach investigation involves identifying and resolving contract violations, while dispute resolution helps in addressing breaches through arbitration or other means. So we developed this system architecture using 3 diagrams. So the entity relationship diagram helped us in defining the entities, attributes, and their relationships, while the swim lane diagram helped us to map workflows across different roles. And then we have use case diagrams, which helped us to outline the interaction between the actor and the systems. So now we look at the data dictionary that we have. These are the entities. There are 9 entities. These are the entities and their definitions. I'll directly move on to the ER diagram to know more about them. The next slide. So the central entity was a contract. So a contract is a legal agreement between different parties. So another important entity is party, which can be an organization or an individual which is involved with the contract. So as you can see here, there is a one-to-many relationship between them, which means that a contract can have more than one party involved. Similarly, another important entity is jurisdiction, which also has a one-to-many relationship. So let me say that most of our entities here have a one-to-many relationship among them. Jurisdiction is a legal body which will be looking after all the legal activities in the audit. Other entities include the auditor. So this contract can be assessed with the help of an auditor. It can be amended with the help of jurisdiction. And if some kind of breach happens, then it can lead to dispute resolution, or in worst case, it can lead to arbitration. So let me tell you an example. So consider a lease agreement between a tenant and a landlord. So this contract will be governed by the legal body, which is a local jurisdiction, which will ensure that it adheres to the rental laws. And if a dispute arises, then it can lead to arbitration for resolution. Now we'll move on to our first use case. The first use case is validate contract terms and conditions. This ensures that the contracts are legal, enforceable, and aligned with jurisdictional requirements.
So the actors involved here are contract manager, who initiate the validation process and retrieves necessary contract details, a legal advisor, who reviews the contract for legality and compliance with jurisdictional laws, parties, which provides mutual consent to the contract terms, and jurisdiction authority, who confirms that the contract is enforceable within its legal domain. The steps are that the contract manager first retrieves the contract details, including parties and jurisdiction. Then the legal advisor reviews the contract for legality within the specified jurisdiction. The parties involved provide mutual consent for the terms. Then the legal advisor ensures that the contract terms meet the legal standards. And then the jurisdiction authority confirms enforceability within its domain. So the triggers, that is, the process can be initiated when a new contract is created, during a contract renewal phase, and if a jurisdictional law changes, which requires a reassessment of the contract. So the functional requirements include initiating validation and retrieving contract details, conducting legal review and obtaining consent, and verifying jurisdiction and store validation outcomes. The non-functional requirements include operational requirements, performance requirements, and security requirements. The operational requirements include device compatibility, reliable connectivity, adaptable layouts. The performance requirements include real-time updates, simultaneous access, and process efficiency. The security requirements include role-based access control, encryption, access restriction, audit logging, and multi-factor authentication. Moving on to Riddhi for the second use case. So our second use case was contract auditing and compliance. We can see that the actors in our use case were contract manager, auditor, and legal advisor. So basically, in this use case, periodic audits are conducted to ensure that all contracts are in compliance with legal and regulatory requirements. So the steps for this use case was that first the auditor accesses the contract database to review compliance, and then the contract manager provides contract details for auditing. Then the auditor reviews offer, consideration, jurisdiction, and amendments for legal compliance. And then the legal advisor assists in resolving any compliance issue if there is. And then the contract manager updates term if necessary, and the audit results are logged. The triggers, we had 3 triggers in our use case, which were scheduled audit, contract breach investigation, and audit request from legal department. Coming on to functional requirements. So in the functional requirements, the functional requirements, the first one is initiate and log compliance audits, which basically enables users to start audits and log their initial details in the system for tracking and reference. Then we have retrieve and prepare contract details for review, which allows users to access and organize contract data necessary for compliance evaluation. Then we have resolve discrepancies with legal advisor support, which facilitates collaboration with legal advisors to address and resolve any issues or inconsistencies which is identified during the audit process. And then we have record audit outcomes and updates in the system, which is captured, which is basically the capturing of results of the audit and updating the system to reflect compliance status and any necessary changes to contract details. Coming on to non-functional requirements, the first one is operational. It's mostly same across all the use cases. But then the first one is basically ensuring compatibility across devices with a responsive design for seamless user experience. And then we have the performance requirements, which is basically providing real-time system updates with a responsive time of less than maybe 2 seconds to ensure efficient workflows. And the last one is security, to implement robust measures including role-based access control, encryption of data in transit and at rest, and comprehensive audit logs to track system activities and ensuring data integrity. Moving on to the third use case.
So moving on to the third use case, which is a breach of contract investigation. We have 4 actors as well as 3 main triggers for this process. The 4 actors being affected party, the contract administrator, legal counsel, and dispute resolution arbitrator. The triggers being the breach notifications by affected party, unfulfilled payment obligation, and a complaint from a partner or a client. When either of these triggers happen, first the affected party report breach to the contract administrator, who will then gather evidence and then update contract management system, followed by the legal counsel, who will review contract for breach
And finally, the dispute resolution arbitrator will facilitate dispute resolutions. So the functional requirements in this process is notifying and reviewing of breaches, collecting evidence and facilitate the resolution, and log outcomes and update contract status. As my friend mentioned, the non-functional requirements across all the use cases are same. The device compatibility and reliable access, real-time updates, and the main difference is the support for at least 10 users. And all the security measures like RBAC, encryption, MFA, and audit logging are necessary. So good evening, everyone. I'll be going through the swim lane diagram. We came up with this idea of getting everything across whatever the use cases we discussed and whatever the obligations we had during the process can be figured out using the swim lane diagram, because here we have segregated the entire process into 5 functional lanes, which are distinct with each other, but still associated with each other. So talking about each lane, let's begin with the first lane, that is audit or compliance. So here's where the initial assessment of contracts are done. This is done to ensure compliance with both internal and external standards. For example, imagine a company that is entering into a partnership with a supplier. So the compliance team checks if the supplier has valid certifications and if the supplier meets all the regulatory standards or not. And upon this assessment is done, it acts as a foundation for contract validation and passes whatever information and data is necessary to the contract management team, which is the second lane here. So this is the phase where all the core operations of managing and validating contract is done. So the first step, which is retrieving the contract details. So here all the data, it can be documents or clauses related to the supplier agreement, is handled and collected at first place. And then comes the validation of terms and conditions, which is same as the use case 1. Here, for example, a team checks if the supplier agrees to deliver products within 30 days. So if it is stated in the document or the contract, the supplier has to provide the service within 30 days. That is checked here, that is validated here. And talking about the validation of legality, mutual consent, and jurisdictional compliance, at this stage, usually the contract is ensured whether it is adhering to the legal requirements. And for example, if the contract might be under the jurisdiction of Virginia law. So this step ensures that if the compliance is done or not, and it validates that step. And then comes the logging of audit contracts. So which is kind of aligned with our use case 2. So here, all the contracts are logged for audits, which can be periodic or maybe specific event. For example, the supplier fails to deliver the product within 30 days. So that is where this is logged in. And then once every, in order to kind of have a comprehensive approach, there's a generation of compliance logs. So this step ensures there's transparency and clear record of contract adherence. Then comes the third lane, which is legal governance, which is kind of ensuring again whether all the legal and jurisdictional standards are compliant or not. And then if the compliance issue is detected, then comes the risk resolution lane. So risk resolution is where any potential contract breaches are managed. So it can be detecting of breach. Let's say a supplier again fails to deliver products on time or a wrong product within the same time. The system automatically flags this as a breach. And then this breach is investigated further. Here, all the evidences are collected and understood why the breach actually occurred. Was that delay because of a natural calamity or a disaster, or was it because of pure negligence from the supplier? So that is investigated at this step. And then if it is not resolved at this phase, it is then escalated to the arbitration team. So under arbitration, the process goes like this. So both the parties supplies their justification and documents and the contracts, claims, everything in the process. And then an arbitrator reviews and suggests the binding solutions. Maybe, for example, the supplier might say the delay was due to an unforeseen circumstance. But the arbitrator will again assess that and then decide whether supplier should waive maybe a portion of the penalty that is charged or change in contract terms or terminate the term. So accordingly, based on the result of that, the contract database would be updated, the final resolution, whether it is a continuation of the contract or an amendment to the existing contract or termination of the entire contract. So that is updated, and it is ensured that record keeping and both transparencies and accountability is ensured throughout this process. So in conclusion, we can say that the entire process was learning how can we approach any given problem in a structured way, and how can all these diagrammatic techniques help us solve any kind of problem. And as the other team mentioned, Hunter and Ivan mentioned, we learned majorly of the advantages of breaking down the things. So we had to, we started with a single diagram, and then when we delved into each and every step of that diagram, we could generate much more in-depth analysis using other diagrammatic techniques. For example, the other team used swimlane diagram for a holistic approach. But we kind of came up with this swimlane diagram after all the use case diagrams. So both are anyways valid, but it's just a different perspective. So that is what we kind of learned throughout the process. And then, yeah, collaboration, for example, the holistic approach we have taken, it's as in the case, like collaboration between compliance team, a management team, legal team, resolution of functions for integrity and accountability. Similarly, the way we team kind of performed throughout the semester, because yeah, exactly. We had a holistic approach because everyone had a different perspective. And talking about the role of AI, it was very crucial. I don't know why is it not showing. So as I was talking, right? Yeah, exactly. So this is something we just added during the presentation. I mean, to talk about the role of AI, we started like ChatGPT was the most popular when we started the semester. So we had the subscription for ChatGPT. So we started working through ChatGPT. It especially helped us in organizing our thoughts. Since everyone had different thoughts, we used to just put every thought into the chat and then ask it to organize so that we can come up with the next step in a structured way. And talking about the other views where we use ChatGPT was to create this presentation. And then, yeah. What's wrong with that? Yeah. And then talking about the other AI tool we used was Notebook LLM. As soon as we learned about the tool in the class, we started using that. Yeah. It helped us in mainly summarizing the documents. So, for example, we used to find some long legal documents online, but we were not sure how can we implement the concepts in that in our project. So we could just download that and just upload it to Notebook LLM and ask it to and align it to our requirements. And talking about the use of AI in diagramming, so we used the Lucid Chart has a AI plugin which helps you just give the prompts and it will generate a draft of the diagram at least. So you can use it as the starting point and then we can reiterate all those things. And we used to feed that diagram on Claude AI because Claude AI was better in giving a structured stepwise approach for creating these diagrams. So we kind of used AI extensively in our entire journey.
And learning that different AI tools have strengths and weaknesses,
yes,
right? We've seen that Gemini sucks at coming up with drawings, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So now you've got more experience in these areas. Again, nice work all the way around. Jay, I'll turn it over to you first.
I guess I have a little question, and maybe you said it and I missed it, but confidential and copyright on some of these slides. I only noticed it about halfway through. Is that because you were using the tools?
There are two reasons for this. One, because of the template that the AI gave. And the other, we just retained it because the topic which we are talking about, the validity of compliance and regulations. And it's actually confidentiality copyright. So.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, that was just the sidebar, but I guess overall I really liked the whole thing. I thought you know, I do like the tie to the requirements. I like the integration of the use cases to the swim lanes, and then you talked about that at the end with your holistic approach. I guess my one question on the ER diagram where you had the relationships that it seemed like pretty well defined, you know, it was pretty thorough. Any thoughts on how you might use this to automate maybe controls or put checks and balances through the system?
I mean, ERD, so to talk about the evaluation of ERD, we came up with a, how do I say, the hub and spoke diagram first. But as we came across the different use cases, that was not so helpful because, as you just mentioned, keeping checks at places was kind of cumbersome when it comes to hub and spoke diagram. So that's when we the star schema diagram, and then we kind of started kind of complicating the diagram. Then again, so once we again we use ChatGPT to kind of merge throughout these steps, and then that's when we figured out that those checks and can be put in places with a simplified diagram. So, for example, the check here would be the arbitration. So, the dispute resolution and, for example, if the dispute is resolved at the given stage, you don't have to escalate it to the arbitration. So, not every case has to be dealt by arbitration. So, there are only few cases that goes to the that gets escalated to the arbitration phase. So, that's one kind of check we could put in this ER diagram. And this diagramming technique was helped us a lot because in deciding how do we go about that? How do we go about these checks in places?
And if we talk about the practical application of it, I personally have seen it if especially the consulting or the audit companies, they have these ERD or the process flow diagrams in their tools and systems, and then each process or each entity is linked to its respective risk and controls. So when you go and give some control in the system, it gives an alert based on the process or the ERDs, and that's the real life application of these diagrams.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you guys. We have one more to go. I know who it is. You don't raise your hand.
So hey all, good evening. Myself Mikash Manuel, and these are my teammates Chandni, Ujjwal, Mohit, and Gao. So we together are metrics movers, and today we are here to present on the topic efficiencies related to advanced liquidation receiving reports. So in this project, we as a team focused on improving the efficiency and accuracy, addressing deficiencies, and enhancing our system functionality. So now let's dive into what we have achieved during this project. Saying about the executive summary, we first reviewed the data dictionary. We ensured a clear and consistency of data definitions, providing a strong foundation for accurate data management. This step also highlighted areas where we require standardization across the departments. And the next step was developing a structured data model. So designed to streamline data organization and support effective reporting and analysis, we as a team were able to ensure that our model has scalability to handle the increasing data volumes. And next step we done is the designing of ER diagram, entity relationship diagram. We visualize the relationship between critical entities such as reports, suppliers, departments, and audit trails, where we could improve understanding of data flows. And also this visualization aided in identifying potential redundancies or missing opportunities. And the next one we have done is we created use cases. And also we have addressed many challenges, like we identified and resolved key issues where we related to software limitations, data quality inconsistencies, and time constraints. This proactive approach minimized risk and also helped us to improve project efficiencies. Now, coming on to data dictionary. Of course, the data dictionary served as a foundational tool for defining and managing the key entities, attribute, and relationship in our system. It provides us a structured framework to ensure consistency, clarity, and accuracy in data usage across various processes. For example, in our system, entities like reports, suppliers, departments, deficiencies, and audit trails are clearly outlined with attributes such as unique identifiers, dates, descriptions, and status indicators. This allows seamless integration of data into processes like financial forecasting, supplier liquidation tracking, and compliance reporting, etc. So by standardizing how data is defined and shared, the data dictionary simplifies complex workflows and enhances collaboration between our teams. For instance, it ensures that the report status, supply information, and departmental performance metrics are consistently referenced, and it helps us to avoid errors and duplications. Now, coming on to use case. The use case diagram we have mentioned here represents the flow of data and interactions among various teams and processes within an organization for achieving specific objectives such as financial forecasting, supplier liquidation tracking, and departmental performance analysis. Now, before talking about the key use cases, we can go on to key actors and their roles. So the first key actor is department team. Saying about the department team, it contributes to financial forecasting by providing relevant data and insights about the respective areas. And the next one is finance team, who focus on generating financial reports, ensuring they comply with internal standards, regulations, and all. And the third one is senior management. They utilize the financial forecast data for high-level decision-making and strategic planning. And they relied on the timely delivery of accurate reports for settling goals and reviewing the organizational performance. And the fourth key actor is auditors and the compliance officers. They participated in validating and verifying data accuracy within our system. And the fifth one is suppliers, who provide us data for supplier liquidation tracking for us to enable the organization to evaluate and manage supplier-related processes efficiently. And the sixth one is department management, who is responsible for overseeing the tracking of supplier liquidation and ensuring the alignment with department goals. And the final key actor is analysts. Those are the persons who analyze departmental performance data and generated actionable insights. And coming on to key use cases, first one is financial forecast. So in financial forecast, we integrate data from department teams so as to project financial outcomes and to assist our senior management in long-term planning. The second key use case is track report status. So in this use case, we ensure that report creation and delivery are monitored, enabling the timely resolution of any delays or discrepancies. And the third one is generated complicated reports. Taking out this use case, we represent the creation of complex, multi-phase reports that provide a comprehensive view of our organizational performance. And the fourth use case is supplier liquidation tracking. So in this use case, we monitor and manage the status of supplier liquidation process, ensuring the optimal use of resource and its alignment with the financial goals. And the final use case is the department performance analysis, where we evaluate performance metrics at the department level, allowing the management team to identify areas for improvement and to celebrate the success thereby. Now, let me hand over the presentation to Chandni for the ER diagram.
Yeah, so this is the ER diagram which we have come up with. So let's begin by understanding the two main entities involved in this relationship, which is deficiency and advanced liquidation. Deficiency is this entity records any issues or problems which is identified during the liquidation process. And advanced liquidation entity captures the financial details of the liquidation process and its key attributes. And the relationship between these two entities, the deficiency entity is connected to the advanced liquidation entity through the related liquidation ID attribute. This is a foreign key in the deficiency table that points back to the liquidation ID in the advanced liquidation table. This relationship allows the system to trace every deficiency back to the specific liquidation process. For instance, if a liquidation transaction has a missing document or an incorrect financial data, a deficiency record is created and linked to the liquidation using the related liquidation ID attribute. This ensures that any issue flagged during the liquidation process is directly associated with the source. The purpose of the relationship is if an auditor notices a deficiency marked as unresolved, this can immediately trace it back to the associated liquidation process and identify what needs to be fixed. So this diagram which we have come up with is a simplified data flow and helps us in identify dependencies between the different components and making the system more efficient. Moving on to the data flow diagram. This is the data flow diagram which we have come up with in the tool. And this data flow diagram illustrates the flow of information in managing deficiency, tracking corrective actions, and generating compliance report. It begins with input from the supplier and processes through multiple stages such as recording the report, tracking the deficiency, assigning the corrective actions, and resolving the issues. The key insights which we can gain from this diagram is the diagram highlights the systematic tracking of deficiency through iterative workflows, and this centralized data management ensures the corrective actions are documented and more efficient. Moving on to the next diagram, which is the event-driven process chain. This diagram depicts a structured approach from the starting to the end to deficiency identification and till the resolution. It includes decision points for identifying deficiency and evaluating whether the corrective actions have resolved the issues. The key insights which we can gain from this diagram is the decision points drive the process dynamically, ensures deficiency are addressed systematically, and the iterative workflows allow the repeated corrective actions until all deficiencies are resolved. Moving on to the next diagram, which is the context diagram. This diagram provides a high-level overview of the advanced liquidation reporting system and its interaction with the external stakeholders, such as the suppliers, analysts, managers, and financial teams, and auditors, and also the compliance officers. The insights which we can gain from this diagram is the diagram acts as a centralized hub, facilitating the efficient data flow and collaboration among the stakeholders. And the compliance and reporting are streamlined through the interactions within the auditor and the compliant officer. So I'm handing over to Ujjwal.
Yeah, so despite progress we made, we faced several challenges where, firstly starting off with the software issues where the system errors and slow performance hindered our compliance tool integration. Incomplete or inconsistent entries required manual validation, consuming significant time. And balancing this project along with other courses with the deadlines was a little challenging, but manageable through effective teamwork. So overcoming these challenges taught us very valuable lessons where we can get to see about in our key takeaways. So our project provided several key takeaways. We gained hands-on experience in system design, data modeling, and diagrammatic techniques. We leveraged with the ChatGPT, LM Notebook, and diagramming tools to enhance productivity and accuracy. We strengthened the teamwork and problem-solving skills, which enabled us to overcome challenges effectively. So, I mean, we hope that these lessons will definitely guide us in the future projects involving complex system analysis and optimization. Coming to the recommendations, so based on our findings, we propose these 3 recommendations. Firstly, implementing the tools to detect deficiencies automatically, reducing the manual intervention. Provide users with system training to improve proficiency and utilization. Develop dynamic dashboards for real-time tracking and reporting, ensuring the data is actionable and accessible. So these recommendations addresses the existing gaps and give us a way for a more efficient and reliable system. So in conclusion, this project highlights the importance of addressing the deficiencies in the advanced liquidation receiving reports. Our deliverables, including the data dictionary, ER diagram, and use cases, established a strong framework for resolving the deficiencies. So by incorporating our recommendations, the systems can achieve even greater efficiency and accountability. Yeah, so let us also see.
We are also going to discuss about the BigCo case. Yeah, so our sin, which we have.
Tie-in, you're saying, as the other group found as well, right?
Sorry?
There's a tie-in between what you found in this and the BigCo case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
We were able to connect our sin with what we had in the BigCo.
Please.
So our sin was the lack of
qualified data leadership.
The ubiquitous challenge, right? You're noticing.
Yeah, so we came up with some challenges to BigCo. So related to arson, which is BigCo's failure can be directly linked to the leadership issues. The data management team was filled with underqualified members, which was a direct relation of poor leadership. And the enterprise data executive deprioritized training, leaving the team without a shared understanding or strategy. This was another major challenge. And consultants were treated as task workers rather than advisors, wasting their expertise. And leadership focus on short-term goals led to the abandonment of the long-term strategies. And finally, the ED's suggestion left the team leaderless, and progress was stopped at that moment. And these points illustrate how leadership gaps triple the BigCo's data management efforts. And moving on to the problems stemming from the sin of lacking qualified leadership. The lack of qualified leadership created 4 key problems, which we identified, which is the lack of strategic vision. The leadership failed to articulate a clear data strategy aligning with the BigCo's goals. And coming to the second point, which is the inconsistent execution, the teams operated in silos without a proper guidance, resulting in discontinued efforts. And the cultural barriers, leadership failed to foster a data-driven culture or address resistance to change. And the resources were wasted, progress was delayed, and the organization missed chance to use the data strategically. So all these problems show why qualified leadership is a non-negotiable requirement for the data management success. And moving on to the next one, which we have come up with some proposed solutions to address the leadership efficiencies. So to address these leadership gaps, we propose this 5 key solutions. Firstly, it is the hiring, which is hire a qualified chief data officer with expertise in enterprise data initiatives. Elevate data leadership by having CDO report directly to the executive team. Implementing training programs for leadership and teams to develop a shared understanding of data management, and foster collaboration by aligning IT and data terms under unified leadership, and create a clear, actionable data strategy aligned with a business goal. So these are all the solutions which we have come up with for BigCo.
Now, coming on to the recommendation and key takeaway, I would say that our recommendation emphasizes on the importance of qualified leadership in the data management. Firstly, we have to prioritize hiring leaders with domain expertise to bridge the gap between IT and business objective. So what happened in BigCo was their IT, the technology, wasn't able to achieve their long-term business objectives. They solely focused on technology only, without even giving proper attention to the processes and the people. And secondly, we have to restructure the organization to empower data leaders and eliminate the isolations. So here also the data management under each department team was really isolated. They had no collaboration or anything. Miscommunication was there. And thirdly, we have to invest in a culture shift that recognizes data as strategic long-term asset. So what happened with BigCo was they consider data as a resource for their technology, not as a long-term asset. They should have leveraged their data as their asset. And finally, we should develop a clear metrics to track the effectiveness of leadership and the success of data initiatives. And now talking about the key takeaways, the first one I would say is that leadership is very critical. The right leadership is the foundation for strategic data management. And without strong leadership, data initiatives risk and being underfunded and undervalued. Next one is, as I mentioned earlier, data should be considered as a strategic asset rather than an IT team's resource or anything. And also, viewing data as a business enabler, it fosters innovation and competitive advantage for the company. And also, cultural buy-in is really essential. Leadership must drive alignment across all the organization and departments. A unified approach ensures every team understands their role in the data strategy. Now, talking about the conclusion, the lack of qualified data leadership was BigCo's fundamental issue. This sin undermined the data management efforts, delayed progress, and wasted resources. And by addressing this gap with the right leadership and strategies, BigCo can transform its data into a true strategic asset. And yeah, that's it. So thank you all. Thank you for your kind patience and listening.
I didn't ask you to tie those two together, but nice work, right? Just the money coming at you. Jeannie, I know you like the measurements slide that they had.
Say that again, Peter. I'm sorry.
I know you like the measurements components that they had.
Yeah, that's near and dear to my heart. I don't know how we would know we were successful. Years ago, I was taught, define success before you start, like I saw with some of your, I really like the problem statement, restated several times in a couple of them. But, now how do we know that we were successful, even though we've defined it? How are we going to know? So it's kind of taking it one step further and defining whether or not we've got measures, what those measures are, and then whether or not we've achieved them at certain intervals. So Thank you. This was great. I'm just going to go back to the last, gosh, now. Okay, wait. I can't read my own handwriting. I guess, do you think like on this one, would a minimum viable product have been helpful through, through, I can't remember where it was when you guys were talking about your recommendations. On the last, I'm kind of wrapped up in the big company now, so if you maybe can go back to the other slides. I'm going back to ask a question on the last presentation. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because I saw some good integration work in there as well. Yeah, I'm wondering if it like a minimum viable product was, I think it was before the recommendations though. I can't remember why. It was I had questions on your context diagram before that. So maybe it was it was after the context diagram. So if you go back to the context diagram, I can ask that one as well. So I guess I think it was a point of clarification here. So the way I'm reading the context diagram was that the only people touching the system were the supplier and the finance team. And so the finance team was responding to the auditors. And then the complaint officer was what I was a little confused on, and the analyst and the manager, they're not touching the system at all. Is that right? Am I interpreting that correctly?
I think Mohit could answer this more clearly because he was working on the context diagram.
Could I have you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, I guess when I read this system diagram, right, the system is the purple, I'm seeing purple, the advanced liquidation reporting system. What it looks like to me when I read this diagram is that the supplier and the finance team are the only two touching the system directly. And then the supplier and the interfaces with the analyst with the manager. Is that like what this looks like is the manager is not interacting with the system at all. And I don't know about the complaint officer either.
The message that you wanted to show, Mohit, was that the analyst, the manager, and the auditors, the complaint officers, do not interact with the advanced liquidation system.
Yeah, no, we wanted them separated from the system so they're not getting the numbers and the data that's available on the floor, I guess you could say.
Okay.
Like a more cleared out information.
So depending on how you're running it, you could actually include another diagram, and I know you can't see this, but maybe so you guys can convey to what I'm trying to describe. But you could make the system larger and put the supplier and the finance team in as part of the system, in which case the analysts and the auditors would be interacting with that system. And then you could make it even larger again, show the manager was interacting with the analyst and part of the system. So again, your context shifts, your perspective shifts. And I think that's what Jeannie's question is getting towards, is if a minimum viable product might have helped define this in more specificity. Does that get out of Jeannie? I know you can't see me drawing on the board either, but.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I think you're kind of seeing what, I guess my question to me, it's like, well, we still have the analyst, the manager, the auditors, and the complaint officers. And I see you have some reports on the right-hand side. I guess it just seems like the system isn't addressing their roles, what their roles are. And so it made me wonder, and I thought, well, maybe I'm getting confused on the briefing. So I thought I might have been missing something. But that's what I've been used to with the context diagram, is it's kind of showing who's interacting with the system directly. Well, the way I read this is now I've got a lot of pressure on my finance team and my supplier and my analyst to answer, like, in other words, they're doing things that I'm not seeing in the system, the way I'm reading this. And so now they're answering to a manager and a complaint officer, but they're doing something manually that the system's not automating for me potentially. So that's why I was and I guess that's Peter's right. That's kind of what I was trying to get to with like a minimum viable product, or, something where each one of these roles has some sort of information that they're receiving from the system, or question that would be answered. Right now, I don't know what the analyst is telling the manager. You know what I mean? And that's kind of,
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, I don't know. That was I was curious, and then I didn't want to stop in the middle, but and then I was wondering like some sort of like testing to see, hey, did we get this? Is this really answering all my checks and balances? I thought it was good, and then I thought, of course, the big company. I was like, well, wait a minute, that was really good. Yeah, definitely the metrics
Slides were
piece.
nice in appearance too.
Yes.
Did you guys, is that you or the AI that's doing that?
Yeah, it was AI.
It was AI.
Presentation.
Good, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's
Very
cool.
appealing slides. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That was really fun to watch that. Oh, I do have one question for anybody, not necessarily just this presentation. When you were putting it into the tool, were you able to use the integrated meta model from, like, were you able to use, like, if it was supplier, for example, if you were dragging supplier into another diagram, were you able to carry that metadata with you, or were you guys trying to do that at all? Because it's hard to tell, just on
They
the
had
screen.
everybody was in individual silos still.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay. Yeah, that would have been fun. Okay.
That's what I talked to Tim about, right?
But even with the silos, were you able to go from one
Hi, Chris.
diagram to another and grab the art of like the objects? No?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, we could do that because
You could.
yeah.
Okay, great.
Whenever we were trying to insert a new actor with the same name, it was not going there.
That's exactly what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Specific to the use case diagram, but I could see what Jeannie is talking about, where we could integrate a particular entity or something in the model that could be integrated through various diagrams. That wasn't possible due to one, the time constraint on how late we got access to the case tool.
Yeah.
And secondly, we weren't familiar with the tool as per se. So that's why I think so integrating with that time constraint itself was a difficult problem.
So let me just make a couple of concluding remarks about your presentations here. Again, I think y'all did a great job on these. The case tool, as you've seen, has some potentials there. We didn't get it quite early enough. That's a cool piece. That should, hopefully we'll be able to get it early on in future cases. We now have the idea that if we pay them, they'll give us the tool. So that's kind of a good thing. And I think $11 was not an unreasonable price, especially since you got your books for free in this class anyway. So, but the more you use the case tool, the more it drives the entire group towards integration. And that's what Jeannie was getting at that last comment. And it would be really great if we could pull all this stuff together. We'll see what the extent that we can do that. And that's what Chris is going to play a little bit with on that. I make a couple other notes here. One, you all, I think, gained value in understanding this iterative approach. And the challenge is you can, of course, iterate to death. We call this analysis paralysis. There's always something more that you can find to go off and do. And you've got to figure out where you get to that point of, okay, this is good enough for what we're doing. So the guiding principle in all of these analyses is, have I reduced the imprecision and uncertainty? You all notice came up with different diagrams, different techniques, and got ideas from each other. That's, I think, really more the way the real world works rather than the way classes work, which is keep your nose on your paper and don't look at anybody else, right? You wouldn't learn as much if you did that. Now, that's okay for the other classes. For this class, it's, I think, an important takeaway for all of that. I was kind of disappointed because many of you had done some very creative work having the case tools do things, and I don't think it showed up in your final projects in there. It's not a problem. Maybe it was not as useful as I thought, but I thought the idea that ChatGPT was creating matrices and the diagrams, things like that, that would actually show up in here because I thought some of that work was really, really good, and I'm just sort of expecting to see it. But anybody have a comment on that? I mean, was it just too hard, or just not useful enough, or cool but not really interesting? I don't know.
So when we were actually trying to do the matrices, the case tool wasn't exactly made for it.
Yes.
So we did try generic tables for the matrices to be replicated in a way, but at some point there were complications due to which we could not go forward with the matrices.
So it was the translation from the case, from the AI into the case tool that was a limiting factor.
Right.
Good. We can address that earlier on next time we do it. But again, I think the work that you did in those areas was very creative, and I just, that was one of the things that sort of got us kind of excited about the project in this semester. Any other thoughts on the matrices? They're pretty and
I think we kind of found that it was just quicker to do it ourselves. I think we got it to spit out some stuff, and it was just, maybe in a couple more iterations of ChatGPT.
Case tool doesn't know enough to make a matrix until you've actually put all of your stuff into it. Right, so the case tool is not going to do the generation for you, but I thought maybe some of those things might have been pieces that you bring across. Don't worry about it. It's not
Yeah, I'd like to expand on that. Is kind of like what Ivan said, but part of it was also like the limited time frame to both learn the case tool, implement the case tool, and then kind of get stuff out of it, especially given we had some of those technical issues that really prohibited us from getting into it until like this week. And I know for plenty of people, I'm actually I was finishing up my senior year for my first degree, so I had 2 capstone projects. I had like 3 finals. I have to finish a paper after this class, so it was just very hard to kind of get the time to really delve into a case tool within like a week and then get everything we wanted.
Is that what I'm hearing? Did I count right? 6 classes?
No, I'm taking 5. I'm taking 5.
Business, so nothing else going on, right?
He's got a daughter.
But no,
I was.
Yeah,
He's got a daughter. He's a young father.
I'm a single dad. I'm a single dad to a 4-year-old who goes to school.
You need more complications in your life.
Yeah.
I had a luxury, right? I was working 20 hours a week for the university, so it was right here on campus. And I had 4 classes max that I ever did as I was trying to get through this. So again, hats off to you guys for doing an awful lot of work. So I appreciate those comments, Hunter. Absolutely. Thanks. One thing to take away. All of your use cases would get flunked. This is not a class about use cases. And you did a good job using use case constructs to describe things, which was fine. But a use case is actually much more detailed than this. So just know this. If somebody wants to quiz you about use cases, don't put yourself out there as an expert. Use case describes a specific interaction that a user has with the system. What you described were the context diagram versions of use cases, but the actual use case would be sign on the system, find this information, look up this piece, I'm describing an entire transaction in there. So a lot more detail. It's not a problem with what you did. What you did is still very, very valuable, but I want you to be aware that if you go in and talk to somebody and say, I know how to do use cases, and you show them this, they're going to go, maybe not quite so much. Is that fair critique for everybody? Again, good jobs on all of this. Okay, it is 6:23.